Hello, listeners. This is Russell, and you've tuned in to Voice Over Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Today is the 22nd of April, 2024. Today's episode is the chapter-by-chapter summary of Nick Trenton's book, The Anxiety Cure. Chapter 1. Daily Habits for Happiness. In the whirlwind of our modern lives, anxiety and overthinking have become constant companions. The incessant chatter of our minds, filled with worries, doubts, and endless hypotheticals, can leave us feeling overwhelmed, restless, and discontented. It seems that no matter how hard we try, the pursuit of peace and contentment eludes us. But what if there was a way to break free from the grip of anxiety and overthinking? What if we could silence the cacophony of our minds and discover a path toward tranquility, happiness, and fulfillment? This book explores precisely that journey, the transformative voyage from a life dominated by anxiety to one of profound calmness and contentment. Through a blend of practical strategies, introspective exercises, and empowering perspectives, we pave the way toward embracing serenity and cultivating lasting happiness. The pages between this cover aim to guide you toward a newfound sense of peace. By providing practical tips and insight on how to manage anxiety and overthinking, you will cover a path toward a more fulfilling and joyful life. We'll also be looking at what happiness is, how it works physiologically, and how we can use current scientific understanding of well-being to start creating a life that we love. Happiness starts in the brain, but that doesn't mean it's just a question of neuroscience. We'll be exploring the question of happiness over the course of 40 practical, evidence-based techniques covering daily happiness habits, joy-inducing environments, and short-term quick fixes for bad days. Finally, we'll consider how we can pull everything together to create lasting lifestyle changes that genuinely make us feel good. Let's dive in and discover the power of tackling our inner struggles and finding the happiness we all deserve. Have a routine, but not a strict one. Having a routine is like having a roadmap to your day. It helps you prioritize tasks and plan out your time. But did you know that having a routine can also help ease anxiety? When everything else feels uncertain and up in the air, having a sense of structure can be incredibly reassuring. It's like a warm hug from your schedule, telling you that everything will be okay. Picture the kind of person you imagine has their life together. They wake up at the same time every day. They have an orderly morning routine. And they have a fixed food, work, and exercise schedule that they move through predictably every day. They're probably quite productive. But are they happy? It turns out that although routine can be beneficial, you don't want to get stuck in a rut. Research psychologist Catherine Hartley and her colleagues conducted a study with 132 participants who were tracked for 3 or 4 months. Hartley wanted to see their general mental health state and overall mood, as well as examine what kind of daily routines they engaged in. What the data revealed was pretty interesting. People who were able to do something novel every day tended to report more positive, happy emotions than those who just stuck to the same old. Chapter 2. Quick Happiness Fixes. So, now that we've covered a few science-backed habits to build into your everyday routine, let's take a slightly different approach. Though habits can be powerful things, sometimes you just need a quick fix to step in and help you shake a bad mood. Life doesn't always go to plan, and sometimes it's worth having a happiness toolkit to whip out in an emergency situation. If you're thinking, well, my emergency coping mechanism is food, then you're actually not too far off the mark. More on that later. In this chapter, we'll look at a handful of practical tricks you can use in the spur of the moment to lift a low mood and brighten your day. What makes a happy song happy? Have you ever noticed how a happy song instantly lifts your mood? It's not just your imagination. Maybe you've also noticed that there are plenty of curated playlists out there, for example on Spotify, that are organized specifically with the intention of making you feel energized, relaxed, or just plain happy. But how do people know which songs make them feel good? Can a song really boost someone's mood? Happy songs have been scientifically proven to boost your happiness levels and reduce anxiety. In fact, listening to uplifting music is an effective way to increase feelings of contentment and fulfillment. When we listen to music that we enjoy, our brains release dopamine, a feel-good chemical that helps us relax and feel happier overall. It turns out that there are predictable characteristics of songs that people universally claim are happy. Neuroscientist Dr. Jacob Jolich at the University of Groningen set out to unweave the rainbow and come up with a mathematical formula for a happy song, as well as the ultimate feel-good playlist. He began by closely analyzing the music of the British electronic band ABBA and found that every single song was about a cheerful situation, or else fun, nonsense lyrics, was a little faster than the average song, an average of around 145 beats per minute, 20 more than the average pop song, and was always written in a major key which sounded peppy and confident. These three elements, he would soon learn, play a big role in our perception of how happy a song sounds. While Jolich admits that a happy song is highly personal and strongly depends on social context and personal associations, he still set about compiling his own mega playlist of the world's happiest songs. Now, it's important to note that Jolich didn't publish this research in peer-reviewed journals, but people seem to like his analysis anyway. If you're compiling your own playlist, take a page from his book and look for the three key elements, and then turn up the volume when you're feeling down. The songs were Don't Stop Me Now, Queen; Dancing Queen, ABBA; Good Vibrations, The Beach Boys; Uptown Girl, Billy Joel; Eye of the Tiger, Survivor; I'm a Believer, The Monkees; Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Cyndi Lauper; Living on a Prayer, Bon Jovi; I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor; Walking on Sunshine, Katrina and the Waves. Whether you agree with Jolich's taste or not. Chapter 3. Proven Happiness Methods and Techniques. We've covered a few happiness quick fixes, but in this chapter, we'll be looking at longer-term, evidence-based approaches for building a happy life. These are things that we can do consistently, not only to cultivate strong, positive feelings day to day, but also to prevent ourselves from getting overwhelmed by anxiety or depression. The happiness behind positive anticipation. Have you ever noticed how often hopelessness is listed as a symptom of depression, and how frequently unhappy people talk about having no future and nothing to look forward to? Or maybe you've noticed the opposite, that your mood instantly improves the moment you know you have an amazing vacation planned in a few weeks' time, or a fun party happening tomorrow that you can't wait to attend. In fact, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, many people's mental health took a dip precisely because they no longer had any exciting plans waiting in their futures. It turns out that anticipation of future events plays a big role in how we feel in the present. The human brain is built to look to the future because those ancestors who could better plan and prepare for what came next had a survival advantage over those who couldn't. It's what allowed our ancient ancestors to survive famines, winters, and unexpected adversities. A 2005 study in Cognitive Emotion by McLeod and Conway showed that the more pleasant future events a person had to contemplate, the better their mood in the present, and vice versa. Whenever our brains anticipate some future reward, our entire state of mind seems to pep up in expectation of that reward. Not to mention, we seem to be better able to handle any adversity we face in the present. We've spoken about the power of recalling pleasant events like holidays, but it may be that planning such an event is half the fun. A 2020 paper in Science Advances by Egaya and colleagues identified a few noteworthy brain regions involved in positive anticipation: the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, associated with reward, the midbrain, connected to motivation and dopamine release, and the hippocampus, involved in memory creation and emotion. In fact, Egaya claimed that anticipation can probably drive us to prepare better for actual reward consumption so that we can get the most out of it. It's also healthy, good for our mental health, to have something to look forward to, especially in a challenging situation like now. The reward is not physically here yet, but the brain somehow manages to create it in our mind. Likewise, a study published in Frontiers in Psychology found further brain imaging evidence for how we process positive anticipation. In their experiment, the brains of 40 students were scanned while they performed an emotion anticipation task of either positive or neutral events to come. The bilateral medial prefrontal cortex was activated when people anticipated the positive outcomes, a state scientists have long understood reflects an overall sense of well-being. Combining what we know about happiness and memory, we can see that the way we plan and schedule our lives has a powerful effect on our overall well-being. We could take the time to plan pleasurable activities in Chapter 4. Creating a Happy Environment. As you're probably beginning to see, happiness is so hard to define because it takes on so many forms and has so many causes. We could imagine that a happy person is one who is healthy, content, and at home in their environment. And home is the focus of this chapter. In the same way that we can't expect a plant to grow without water, soil, and sunlight, it's a fair assumption that human beings cannot be happy in the wrong environment either. Though it may not seem like that big a deal, our immediate physical environments play an enormous role in our overall sense of well-being. If that weren't the case, big corporations wouldn't bother hiring specialist architects, designers, and industrial psychologists to make sure their workspaces were conducive to happy employees. Green, the shade of happiness. Nature's always been an essential part of human life, from providing shelter and food to being a source of inspiration and relaxation. Science has proven that exposure to nature can have a significant positive impact on our mental health and well-being. Just a walk in the woods or a few hours spent in the park can lower our anxiety levels, calm us down, and increase our happiness and contentment. The fresh air, the gentle rustling of the leaves, the chirping of birds, and the sight of greenery all work together to create a soothing and peaceful environment that helps us forget our worries and recharge our batteries. According to a new paper by Dorita et al., published in the journal Neuroimage, viewing green spaces can help the brain improve attention and better regulate stress. Most of us won't be surprised to learn that exposure to nature lowers anxiety, calms us down, and makes us more content. But what's interesting about this research is that it identifies the reason why: the color green. Plenty of research has been done on the humanity-healing benefits of green spaces, especially in urban areas. Individuals exposed to green environments report lower levels of stress than those in less green settings, say the authors. In this work, we were interested in asking just how green environments engage the human brain and how stress regulatory benefits come about from exposure to these environments. It's one thing to show that all these environments are good for us, but it is just as important to understand why. The researchers did fMRI scans of 44 participants' brains while they looked at images of streets, each with varying degrees of green foliage, grass, and trees. After a 2-week period, the participants were asked to come back to the lab and give both their self-reported stress levels and their opinion on which pictures they liked best. In those people who viewed the greener spaces, a very ancient part of the brain was activated, the posterior cingulate. This area in the limbic system is associated with motivation, emotion, and decision-making in the brain. It was via activation of this area that the researchers then observed that the participants' endocrine systems were better able to regulate stress. This is an important finding. Walking in the forest or enjoying a beautiful garden is not just a nice thing to do. It has significant and measurable effects on our brains. The research. Chapter 5. The Social Side of Happiness. If you've read this far, you might have started to wonder, what about other people? Don't our friends, families, and partners play the biggest role in whether we're happy or not? Well, they absolutely do. In this chapter, we'll be looking not only at the ways our relationships can influence our sense of well-being, but also ways that we can use communication and social interaction to boost our happiness levels. Happiness is a call away. Yes, it's always easier to reach out to people via email or text, but research from the University of Texas at Austin has found that a phone call might actually be the superior way to connect with others. If you're one of those people who thinks phone calls are just too awkward to bother with, think again. Amit Kumar is a McCombs School of Business assistant professor and has co-authored a study with Nicholas Epley of the University of Chicago. The two published their research in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, where they shared that people actually experience more meaningful connection when they reach out in ways that allow them to hear one another's voices. This was despite their fear of it being awkward. They asked 200 participants to predict how it would go to contact an old friend, either by email or by phone call. They then randomly assigned each participant to do either an email or a phone call and asked them again to rate how the interaction went. When it came to actual experience, people reported they did form a significantly stronger bond with their old friend on the phone versus email, and they did not feel more awkward, Kumar said, which goes against people's predictions. Similar experiments were done where people were tasked with connecting via live chat, video chat, or audio alone without video. The researchers discovered that people felt far more connected to one another when using their voices, even though they predicted it would be easier and more comfortable to text. And to preempt the usual objection, the researchers also noted that conducting a phone call took no longer than writing or responding to an email. What makes this research interesting is that it directly addresses people's misconceptions while measuring the actual outcomes of certain behaviors. Going deeper, it turns out that the power of the human voice can be explained by our old friend oxytocin. A paper by Seltzer, Ziegler, and Pollack titled "Social Vocalizations Can Release Oxytocin in Humans" explains just how important it is for our species to communicate vocally. It's what our voices evolved to do, after all. Seltzer et al. Already knew that physical touch could stimulate oxytocin's release. But what about simply hearing someone's voice? Could that have a similar effect? The team focused on mother-daughter pairs, assigning participants to one of three groups: complete contact, speech-only contact, or no contact at all. They discovered that children receiving a full complement of comfort, including physical, vocal, and nonverbal contact, showed the highest levels of oxytocin and the swiftest return to baseline of a biological marker of stress, salivary. Chapter 6. Your Brain and Happiness. People get happier as they age. We'll begin with one common misconception, the idea that happiness belongs mostly to the young and sprightly, and that the older you get, the more miserable you'll be. In fact, this assumption may be part of the reason so many people dread getting old. They imagine that beyond a certain age, people just have to settle down to a dreary routine and accept their slowly declining health. But does the science have anything to say about happiness and aging? It does. And it turns out that getting older can be an unexpected gift in the mental health department. There's research to suggest that older people are better able to perceive happiness and less reactive when it comes to fear and sadness, i.e., they really do mellow. As individuals age, many tend to experience increased happiness and reduced anxiety. This can be attributed to a combination of factors, such as personal growth, shifting priorities, and accumulated wisdom. For example, consider Mary, who was in her late 60s. Throughout her life, she faced various challenges and experienced moments of anxiety. However, as she entered her senior years, Mary developed a greater sense of self-acceptance and learned to prioritize her well-being. She decided to engage in activities that brought her joy, such as painting and spending quality time with loved ones. By focusing on her passions and nurturing meaningful connections, Mary found a deeper sense of contentment and serenity. Her accumulated life experiences and resilience helped her navigate difficult situations with less anxiety, ultimately leading to a happier and more fulfilling life. Leanne Williams and colleagues at the Westmead Hospital in New South Wales in Australia asked 242 people between 12 and 79 years old to view a series of photographs. These pictures were of people with different facial expressions. The participants were asked to select the photos that showed fear and happiness and distinguish them from those that showed sadness, anger, or disgust. As you can guess, their brains were monitored during this task using fMRI scans. The results were published in the Journal of Neuroscience and showed that the older the people were, the more accurate they were at discerning happy expressions. In fact, teenagers were the best of all when it came to spotting fearful ones. The researchers noted that the medial prefrontal cortex showed more activation in elderly people than in teenagers, and considering that this region is associated with inhibition of the fearful responses of the amygdala, it stands to reason that older people are better at self-control and emotional regulation. The part of the brain that deals with emotional control, called the medial prefrontal cortex, was more active in elderly people when they saw fearful faces than in younger people. This region has been shown to inhibit another brain area called the amygdala, which prompts fear. Helen Fisher is an anthropologist at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and she thinks there's an important evolutionary aspect to this difference. There would have been a tremendous advantage to have older people in the group with an optimistic view. You may be wondering, though, if better emotional regulation is the same as being happy. Well, not directly. But if you are able to be less neurotic, less reactive, and better able to manage your own fears, it's reasonable to imagine that you would be more content with life. Exercising better judgment isn't something we... To learn more about the anxiety cure from Nick Trenton, you check it out on Amazon, Audible. You can also learn more about the author and sign up for some free resources from Nick Trenton at bit.ly/Nick Trenton. This has been Voice Over Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Voice Over Work is brought to you by Newton Media Group.